Pissing our pants yet?
What's going on, everyone? The Arid Lord is back for another Walking Dead vlog. I wanted to make one of these last week. I think probably what I'll do before, right between each episode air date, I'm thinking of having a vlog in which I talk about some of the events that happened in last week's episode and also kind of predictions that I have for the coming week. I think this should be, a theme for the channel. Kind of wish I had thought of it last season. I did them every once in a while, but I had a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions going into this next episode based on some things that I know from the general storyline that's followed in the comics and other certain aspects of the story that the writers and the showrunners have taken up. And the main question that I want to ask in this video to you guys and just in general, so I can think it out for myself, is: do you think Dwight is going to turn against Negan in the next episode? We know from the previews that this episode mainly, if not entirely, deals with the sanctuary, Negan dealing with Eugene as a prisoner, and then also dealing with the fact that Daryl escaped. He's probably going to blame Dwight because Dwight was on Daryl watch, giving him food and schlepping him around and all that shit. But, And in the previews, we also see Dwight kneeling in the cell, and there's a scene of him on a motorcycle, and then another scene of him going into a house and throwing drawers and breaking shit. I don't know if he's maybe exiled. I don't know if he's punished in some way. There's a scene of Dwight getting another iron. I don't know who Negan's going to iron this time. We already had the ironing scene in episode 7 when Carl was there for his little visit. So yeah, I don't know. There's been rumors that Negan's gonna blame somebody. I don't know if it's gonna be Dwight for Daryl's disappearance. For me, I would like it if at least by the end of the episode we have an inkling that Dwight is going to turn against Negan in some way, because this is a spoiler. This is a spoiler for the comics. But Dwight does turn against Negan in the comics, and he actually does so in the scene that Rick first meets King Ezekiel. In this issue, Rick is talking to King Ezekiel, and then Dwight appears, having already talked with Ezekiel, and Dwight tells Rick that he's willing to give up all of Negan's secrets. Now, Rick doesn't believe him, and Ezekiel kind of just smiles and watches the whole scene. It plays out very differently than episode 9 did, where Rick is kind of just asking for Ezekiel's support. Morgan's not giving in, Ezekiel's not giving in, then they leave, and Daryl's there for asylum to stay hidden from the saviors. Daryl doesn't even exist in the comics, so everything played out very differently. So for me, I was like, well, does that mean Dwight's not going to be turning good? Because one of the reasons I think Dwight does turn is because Dwight almost becomes the Daryl Dixon of the Walking Dead for Rick. Like he almost becomes Rick's Daryl after he turns against Negan, because Daryl doesn't exist in the comics. So Dwight, with his crossbow and his mannerisms and his way of survival, kind of becomes Daryl in a way. And I guess that's the show's way of making up for the fact that Daryl doesn't exist. But since both Dwight and Daryl exist in the TV show, and it seems like everything the show has done so far has been by the comics of what Dwight does. Dwight shoots somebody in the back of the head with the crossbow to signal his reintroduction when you see him with the burned face. Then he's there when Negan bashes his victims in with the baseball bat. And then there's the scene where Carl shoots a couple of the guys, and then he takes a gun and kind of aims it at Carl. He's still loyal to Negan. There are scenes in the comics as well where Negan's kind of playing up the fact that he has his wife Sherry, and that Dwight can't do anything about it per their agreement. all of these scenes have played out. So, because Daryl's not in the comics, there's no scenes of Dwight taking care of somebody who's imprisoned and eating dog food in a prison cell, listening to Easy Street on repeat 100,000 times. So, for me, I'm interested in this episode because it seems like it's going to be half Dwight focused, and then the other half is going to be Negan probably harassing Eugene and the dynamic Negan has with his soldiers after the events of the mid-season finale. Which is cool. I mean, Negan is my favorite villain of all time, so anything with him in it is probably going to be hilarious. So, some people were pissed off because episodes 9 and 10, we had a good diversity of content at the Kingdom, the Hilltop. The Kingdom, the Hilltop, and Alexandria were all featured in episode 9. We had a diversity of that whole thing. And at the end of the episode, we had the new group that appears and the Saviors ransacking the place looking for Daryl. There was a lot of diversity in episode 9. That's why I really liked it. Same thing with episode 10. We saw Daryl in the Kingdom. We saw the reuniting with Carol. And then we also had part of Rick's group with Father Gabriel learning what this new group has to offer and trying to make a deal. So 9 and 10 did a really good job. Like I was saying before, how not many people have liked the bottle episodes where it's just one character or one group of characters in one location for an entire episode. Episodes 9 and 10 have really branched out and allowed us to see other things that are going on, just like Game of Thrones has done. So I think 9 and 10 get my seal of approval so far. But it seems like episode 11 is just going to focus on the Sanctuary people with Eugene as the hostage. So, I mean, I don't know if there's going to be a lot of time wasted on Eugene being scared and pissing his pants and trying to escape and it not working. And I don't know. Like, some of the stuff that Daryl, in episode 3, because a lot of that was dragged out. You know, Daryl was trying to find a way to escape. The whole episode was about Daryl being tortured. We had some other scenes with Dwight, some scenes with Negan. We had different characters, but it was all centralized to that one place, and it was just a kind of, a day in the life of. The episode was more of a day in the life of, rather than progressing the story to see what future content we get for the plot. So, I'm hoping for 11 we get a little bit of both. I imagine we're going to get a little bit of both, and that's why I'm hoping that we see a bit of a turncoat from Dwight at the end of the episode. I don't know what event would trigger this. Maybe there's a certain line in the comic book where Negan says to Dwight, "I'm going to go ping pong my dick all over these titties. Catch you later, Dwight," while he takes Sherry's arm and rushes her away to supposedly go have sex with her. And that, in the comics, is the straw that breaks the camel's back for Dwight, and that's when he turns. But will they do that scene in this week's episode, this week's coming episode? Maybe. There's a strong chance. Most of the preview shows Dwight, that, part of it is him realizing Daryl's gone, but then we also know that he won't be at the sanctuary for a part of this episode. He'll be on the road on his motorcycle looking for Daryl, supposedly, but he'll also be in some house that we haven't seen before. Some people are saying that's the house that he lived in with Sherry before the apocalypse. I don't know. Maybe if we'll get flashbacks. The show has already investigated his character a couple of times, so episode 3, we had a little bit of that, like the scene where he doesn't shoot that guy at first, and then he shoots him and puts him on the fence as a zombie. We see Dwight struggling a little bit with this in episode 3. So that was the first episode where we saw a little bit of Dwight struggle, especially with the music, that dramatic music we've had since the pilot episode of The Walking Dead, that swells when Dwight's making the decision to shoot the guy or not. So with the musical cues and some other, we've definitely had hints that, Dwight's mind is kind of on the fringe because of Negan's manipulation. So, but for me, how is Dwight going to fit into the picture? How will Daryl ever forgive him? Daryl trusted him once, he stole his crossbow, and because of that, he murdered Denise and pretty much got them all captured for Negan to, do what he did. So Dwight is someone to blame in that whole thing. I don't know how Daryl will ever forgive Dwight, unless he does something like kills one of the main saviors. My theory is that by the season finale, Dwight will kill Simon or something, and that will signal to Rick or Daryl that Dwight is on their side. I don't know, that's just a theory right now. But he has to do something pretty drastic because he's done a lot of harm and pissed off the group so far. And people like Rosita, where Dwight was taunting Rosita in episode 4 of season 7. So he would have to do a lot of things to get everyone's trust back. Let me tell you. So I'm interested. Again, I could be wrong. Maybe he's always going to be a villain, but I don't think so because they've shown a struggle with him. They've shown us that Dwight and Sherry are in a situation in a predicament with Negan that's not win-win. Like, it's not win-win for everybody. And we are having, greater analysis on Dwight's character, that there's, more to this. So, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what they could do. And that's why I'm asking you guys in this video. Now, some people have said that in the last episode, Daryl was leaving the kingdom to go back to the hilltop. Now, while he's on the road, do you think that he will run into Dwight? And maybe, I imagine if Daryl ran into Dwight, he'd try to kill him. But do you think maybe that's when Dwight says that, he's not with Negan anymore? Like, I don't know. I don't know how these events are going to go down. It's very ambiguous, and I'm very much interested in where the show goes from here. So this is my vlog on the future of Dwight. Will he betray Negan in episode 11, or will we start to see a little more, like, hints that are stronger? There was actually an interview with Scott Gimple where someone brings up the fact that Dwight betrays Negan in the comics, and then Scott Gimple tries to avoid the question, but then he hints and says, well, you might see a little bit of that in episode 11, which is this coming week's episode. So this episode is going to be, for me, the deciding factor, where Dwight's character lies now. Because ever since Daryl escaped, that's what I was interested in, and this is the biggest question mark for me moving forward. There are a lot of question marks, including the Oceanside and this scavenger emo goth group, both of which are not in the comics. So there's a bunch of question marks, including Carol's situation, whether she wants to go to war, convincing Ezekiel. They've strayed from the comics a bit, but I know generally where they're going, and because they've strayed a bit, there's a lot of new stuff that I cannot predict, and that's why I'm doing these vlogs with you guys, because the future of the show for me is uncertain. I know the ultimate end goal for where this war is headed, in a sense, but I don't know the details of it, and who's going to die and some of these things that will be happening in between. So that's why I am asking you guys, and hopefully you have some comments to kind of bounce around for me. So thank you for sticking around, and I'll see you guys for another vlog and reaction video this Sunday. Peace out.